3:19 local time, the first GBU-31 JDAM punched through the reinforced roof near Mount Safa, Isfahan. 1 second, then 2. Then the underground depot erupted. 16 Blue 109 penetrator warheads, each weighing around 2,000 pounds, had entered the storage chambers before detonating. The first blast was controlled. The second was not. Missiles, rockets, and artillery rounds began cooking off inside the sealed complex, turning concrete tunnels into pressure chambers. Above it all, at nearly 41,500 feet, the B-2 Spirit, call sign Anvil 31, was already banking south. Its bomb bay doors were closing. Its radar signature was shrinking again. But the danger was not over. The Bavar 373 had seen it. The S-200VE was searching, and a Syad 4 interceptor was seconds from launch. Before we break down how this mission unfolded, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more military aviation stories told minute by minute. 1:47 local time, just outside Iranian airspace. Anvil 31 was not attacking yet. It was waiting. A B-2 Spirit moved through the dark at roughly 41,500 feet, holding just under 545 miles per hour after nearly 10 hours and 40 minutes in the air. No radio calls, no updates to the tankers, no check-ins with the command center. Only the low vibration of 4 F-118 engines and 2 crew members watching a threat display that could change the entire mission in 1 second. Below their feet sat 16 GBU-31 JDAMs, each carrying a BLU-109 penetrator warhead. More than 32,000 pounds of guided steel and explosives, locked inside a bomber, built to cross defended airspace without being seen. The target was still far ahead, an underground ammunition complex near Mount Safa, Isfahan. Reinforced concrete, storage tunnels, missile racks, rocket crates, artillery shells stacked deep enough to feed multiple launch sites across the Gulf region. Then the DMS changed. A faint emitter appeared on the edge of the screen. Ghadir VHF early warning radar. Not a clean track, not a missile lock, just a weak return, appearing and fading between sweeps. But weak was enough. The mission commander watched the signal strength rise, then drop, then rise again. The corridor was tighter than planned. The radar gap that looked safe in briefing was now barely wide enough to trust. He gave the correction. 4 degrees right. The pilot moved the aircraft without speaking. At that altitude, one wrong heading could turn a ghost into a target, and Anvil 31 still had miles of Iranian sky ahead. 2:36 local time, south of Isfahan. The faint return from Ghadir did not disappear. It moved. Inside the regional air defense network, the contact was still listed as uncertain. High altitude, low confidence, no confirmed aircraft type. But in a month of strikes, uncertain did not mean harmless. A surviving S-200VE battery received the warning through a buried fiber line. Satellite imagery had marked that site as destroyed 13 days earlier. The concrete pads were damaged. The old launch rails were burned. But 3 missile vehicles had been moved 6 kilometers away under camouflage netting. Then the square pair radar came alive. Inside Anvil 31, the DMS reacted at once. A new emitter, C-band, bearing northeast, range just under 85 kilometers. The mission commander did not wait for the second sweep. He ordered a 13-degree turn north, putting the B-2's nose closer to the threat. The signal weakened, but the correction came with a cost. The new angle pushed the bomber closer to the search sector of Bavar 373. Far to the west, an F-35 SID package caught the radar emission. One harm was released toward a supporting radar site that had stayed active too long. At 2:51, the missile followed the signal down. A secondary blast flashed on the southern edge of the defense belt. A small radar shelter broke apart. Power lines snapped. The network stuttered for less than a minute, but the warning had already spread. If you enjoy this kind of minute-by-minute military storytelling, subscribe to the channel, because the next moment is the one every B-2 crew fears. Anvil 31 was approaching Mount Safa, and soon it would have to open its bomb bay doors. 3:18 local time, over Mount Safa. The bomb bay doors opened. For almost 10 seconds, Anvil 31 stopped being a whisper. The smooth radar shape of the B-2 Spirit was broken by open panels, launcher drums, bomb bodies, and metal edges that were never meant to face a radar beam. On the DMS, the threat picture sharpened at once. The Mirage 4 AESA radar from the Bavar 373 had been searching through noise. Now it had something solid. A high-altitude return, south of Isfahan, moving fast, right over the target. Inside the cockpit, there was no time to discuss it. The rotary launcher began to cycle, one weapon away, then another. then another. 16 GBU-31 JDAMs dropped into the dark, each one carrying a BLU-109 penetrator warhead. Nearly 32,000 pounds of guided ordnance left the aircraft in a narrow release window. Each bomb was already locked to its assigned coordinate. Separate aim points, separate tunnel sections, separate pressure chambers beneath the reinforced roof. The B-2 was not trying to flatten the mountain, it was trying to break the inside of it. Below, the first bombs reached terminal speed. At 3:19, the leading warhead struck the concrete cover of the underground depot. It did not burst on the surface. The BLU-109 drove downward first. Its steel casing punched through reinforced concrete, passed into the structure, and waited for the delayed fuse to complete its count. Then the first detonation hit. A sharp internal flash tore through one storage chamber. Half a second later, the next bomb fired inside a second section. Then the chain reaction began. Rocket motors ignited in a sealed space. Missile fuel burned hotter than open-air fire. Artillery rounds cooked off in stacked rows. The pressure had nowhere to escape, so it moved through corridors, access shafts, and connecting walls. One tunnel failed, then another. Then the depot began destroying itself. The mountain did not explode all at once. It opened in stages. Dust blasted upward through service vents. Fire pushed through cracks in the concrete roof. Orange-white bursts rolled across the compound as secondary explosions reached storage bays that had not been hit directly. On the ground, the blast wave crossed the perimeter road in seconds. Security lights went out. A section of fencing collapsed. A parked vehicle was pushed sideways by the pressure. At altitude, Anvil 31's doors were already closing. The aircraft banked south. Its radar return shrank again. But the opening had been enough. The Bavar 373 battery now had a firing quality track. The S-200VE had fresh bearing data, and somewhere northeast of Isfahan, a Sayed 4 missile was being prepared to launch. The target had been hit. The mission was not over. 3:21 local time, northeast of Isfahan. The Bavar 373 battery had what it had been waiting for. Not a ghost, not a broken return, a real track. For a few seconds, the open bomb bay had turned Anvil 31 from a faint signal into a clear target. The Mirage 4 AESA radar measured altitude, bearing, and speed before the bomber closed its doors and began turning south. The data was good, but it was already aging. Inside the launch control shelter, the commander had to make the decision that every air defense crew fears. Fire too late, and the target escapes. Fire too fast, and the radar may become a beacon for a harm strike. The warning from the previous blast was still fresh. A supporting radar had transmitted for less than 70 seconds and was hit. The lesson was clear. Every radar pulse had a cost. The commander requested authorization. 4 seconds passed, then a fifth. The Sayed 4 was cleared to launch. The missile left the rail with a white flash and a hard burst of acceleration. Its booster pushed it upward past Mach 4, climbing toward the last confirmed position of the B-2 at more than 41,000 feet. But Anvil 31 was no longer there. The bomb bay doors had sealed. The aircraft's shape had returned to what it was designed to be. Small on radar, difficult to hold, almost impossible to track cleanly without a fresh lock. The Mirage 4 AESA tried to rebuild the picture. It swept the sector again, then again. The return flickered once, shifted, then dissolved into background noise. The S-200VE battery attempted to support the track with its square pair radar, but its bearing was late by several degrees. At those speeds, a few degrees meant miles of empty sky. The Sayed 4 continued forward. A missile designed to chase reflected radar energy was now flying toward coordinates that were already behind the target. Its seeker searched for a signal that no longer held steady. Below, Mount Safa was still burning. Above, Anvil 31 kept turning south, losing altitude by a few hundred feet to change the geometry. The Iranian crew had not made a foolish shot. They had made a delayed shot, and in that delay, the B-2 found the only space it needed to survive. 3:29 local time, south of the Isfahan defense belt. Anvil 31 was still inside danger, but the center of the trap was behind it. The DMS showed scattered emissions across the display. Gadir was still sweeping in wide arcs. The S-200VE was trying to rebuild a bearing. The Bavar 373 searched in shorter, tighter bursts, careful not to keep its radar active too long. No one had a stable track. That was the difference. A radar contact can scare a crew. A firing solution can end a mission. The B-2 dropped a few hundred feet and continued south at nearly 540 miles per hour. The turn was shallow. The correction was precise. Every degree mattered, because every degree changed what the radars could see. Inside the cockpit, the mission commander reviewed the threat timeline. Gadir had found the first faint trace. S-200VE had turned that trace into a warning. Bavar 373 had almost converted it into a kill, and the Sayyad 4 had launched just late enough to chase old air. None of those systems had failed completely. That was the uncomfortable truth. The B-2 survived because multiple layers worked at the same time. Low observable shaping, careful routing, DMS threat recognition, controlled use of ECM, the earlier said strikes, the fear of harm, and finally the short release window over Mount Safa. On the ground, the secondary explosions continued. The depot was no longer one target. It had become a chain of separate failures. One storage bay burned through its ceiling, another collapsed inward. A line of rocket motors ignited in sequence, sending pressure through service tunnels at a speed no emergency crew could outrun. The first estimate was severe. Several storage chambers destroyed. More than 70% of the underground complex unusable. Thousands of artillery rounds damaged or detonated. Multiple missile stocks lost before they ever reached a launcher. The blast had done more than remove ammunition. It had broken a supply rhythm. For the crews watching from command shelters, the lesson was harder to accept. They had detected the intruder. They had tracked it. They had fired. But modern combat does not reward being almost on time. It rewards the side that is ready first. And for Anvil 31, those few seconds were enough. 4:12 local time, and outside the immediate threat zone. Anvil 31 was no longer over Isfahan. The bomber had crossed south of the strongest radar coverage, still silent, still moving, still carrying the weight of what had just happened behind it. On the DMS, the threat picture was fading. Gadir remained active, but its returns were wide and uncertain. S-200VE no longer had useful bearing data. Bavar 373 was searching in short bursts, careful with every radar pulse. The Sayyad 4 had spent its energy chasing a position the B-2 had already left. The mission had not been decided by one weapon. That is the part I find most important. The B-2 Spirit brought Anvil 31 close enough to strike. The GBU-31 JDAM gave the bombs accuracy. The BLU-109 gave them the ability to penetrate reinforced concrete. The DMS helped the crew understand who was searching for them. The ECM disrupted the radar picture when the danger became immediate, and the earlier CD pressure, especially the threat of harm, forced the air defense crews to hesitate at the worst possible moment. Each system mattered, but none of them won alone. In my view, the deciding factor was not only stealth, it was timing. The kind of timing measured in seconds, not minutes. A radar beam stayed dark too long. A launch order came slightly late. A missile climbed toward a target that had already changed shape, direction, and position. That is what makes this mission so intense. Not the size of the explosion, not the price of the aircraft, but the fact that a mission involving a $2 billion class bomber, long-range radars, modern interceptors, and more than 30,000 pounds of guided ordnance could turn on a delay of only 4 or 5 seconds. Behind Anvil 31, Mount Safa was still burning. Ahead of it, the night was opening. And somewhere inside the defense network, commanders were reviewing the same question again and again. Did they wait too long? Or did the B-2 force them into waiting? What do you think decided this mission? Was it the stealth design of the B-2 Spirit? The impact of the GBU-31 JDAM and BLU-109? The electronic warfare from ECM? Or the pressure created by SEAD and HARM before the bomber ever arrived?